Okay, there we go.
Great. So I wanted to say good morning to our Region 7 Stakeholder Advisory Committee members and any of our guests. We don't think we see any in the waiting room right now.
No attendees right now.
Okay, great. I'm sure everyone has a copy of the meeting agenda. Do you guys have that? Okay, so we're going to work through that. But before we get underway, I'm going to do a call to order, which I think we already have here, right, Patrick?
Yes.
That's great. And then I just want to remind everyone, and this is on the agenda at the bottom, but I decided it would be good just to read this to at the beginning of each meeting so that we can stay focused as we think about the questions that come up and what we're really tasked with doing. So the role of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee is outlined in the charter is to play a key supporting and collaborative role by providing input and assistance in examining community challenges and opportunities related to land use, preparation of goals and strategies to implement a regional vision, and recommending changes in zoning. So that's what we're tasked with doing, and that's what we're going to continue to work on as we go through this process. And just wanted to remind everyone of that. And the first thing on our agenda is to open this up to public comment. And remember, we're trying to keep those to just 2 minutes. And if you don't feel that's enough time, there's always an opportunity to write into to Patrick and Desiree and the rest of the members on the team. All of the addresses are on the website. So Patrick, is there anyone in the waiting room at this point?
There's not. Linda was there and I promoted her to a panelist. So she's now joined us as well.
Great. Hi, Linda. Okay, so with that, if we don't have anyone in there, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment, Patrick.
Okay.
And let's go ahead and move right into our old business issues. And the first is the approval of the meeting notes from our last meeting. Desiree, you must be typing like mad while we're doing those meetings because it's pretty long. I mean, it was a lot to read through.
Yeah, we have help from others too. It's not all me.
Oh, okay. There must be someone in the background doing that work. Well, thank them for us because I read through them and I thought they looked good, but has everyone had a chance to review them? Okay, do we have a motion to amend? Are there any amendments anyone wants to offer to the meeting notes? Okay, with that, I'll look for a motion to approve the meeting notes.
So move.
Second?
Second.
Great. Okay, so we're going to accept the meeting notes and enter those into the formal record. And that'll close that bit of business. Again, thank you for doing those. They're really pretty thorough. We covered a lot of ground last meeting, so it was a little bit onerous. The second thing on our old business component of the agenda is the vice chair appointment. So our friend, the county executive, and I spoke, and Patrick spoke with his folks, and we're lucky enough to have Anna Mudd join us as our vice chair. And Anna comes from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, along with her other life endeavors, which includes a little one. But just wanted to say thank you for accepting the appointment as vice chair. We've had a couple changes since we started. And if you wanted to say anything, I heard you were talking with the group a little bit before we started the recorded section of the call, but anything you want to add to the discussion?
No, I'm just really excited to continue to work with everyone. I've been so impressed with the work that the county staff have been doing and the quality of conversation that this group has had so far. So looking forward to working with all of you.
And then Anna, you circulated an email to Patrick and Desiree and I guess it was about a week ago, about the interactive process of being in a group like this. And I found it really helpful because it, challenges people who are less likely to share, and those who might overshare to, provide opportunity for others. It was I thought it was gracefully written, and it gives you a minute to think about this process. And with your permission, I think we ought to just send it to the other members of the group, just broaden it out.
Sure.
I think it's helpful. Does that sound good to you, Patrick?
Sure. Yeah, I can share that. I don't have a link to it that I could put into the chat right now, but that's fine. I can share that after this meeting. if that's okay. Unless you have a link right now and want to share it at this point.
I can try to put it in the chat here in a minute. It was just a blog post I found, I think, that kind of gave a synopsis of the model or the exercise that I found to be pretty radical at the time, because I have always been the kind of person that has no trouble sharing feedback or asking questions. But I thought maybe others would appreciate it as well.
Yeah, well, I know I sure did. And I think, it's just good to kind of think about how these group dynamics work. And it seems to me from your background that that's where that might have come from in the grassroots efforts that you put together. So that'll be great. You guys can look for that either in the chat, or then maybe we'll include it in the meeting notes. So
We can do both, and I did find it here, so I can share that with you now.
Okay, great. And then there's a reminder here to check your Gmail accounts for citizen messages. Now, my Gmail, Patrick and Desiree, comes into my regular email feed, so I can see them. And I don't know if everyone has that set up, but if you do not have it set up, it's important to go back and check that Gmail feed so that you can see if there's questions from the public at large about what we're up to, or even communications from Patrick and Desiree. That's really where it comes. So if you're not getting that, you're really missing a lot of information. So go ahead.
And I would say if anybody needs help setting up how you forward emails from your Gmail account to your personal email account, Desiree and I can help you set that up if you're not sure how to do that. But it is important. This is the way that citizens will be able to contact you, and we want to make sure that you all are getting any emails from the public.
Right. And then my last one here under old business is other. Is there anything else we want to cover, Patrick and Desiree, or anyone else from the group?
Looks like Lily has her hand up.
Yes, I'm sorry I wasn't able to come to the last meeting. I had a daughter that was graduating from college, so we were away for that. But I'm sorry I missed the chair of the Forest Drive Task Force's presentation, but I did hear it online, Bill Reichart. And I participated in that with a lot of other citizens from the city of Annapolis. And I just wanted to tell our group, because I feel like the work that group did is very important to what we're looking at in Region 7. These were all neighborhoods along Forest Drive. We had a lot of similar to what's happening now, where, I get messages in from GAN and other organizations that would like us to talk about certain things. We had a lot of other organizations that were feeding information into our task force for us to deliberate on. And I think we came out with some really great recommendations. Some of them are already being implemented by the county. And I'm going to bring some of them up during the course of our discussions. But there was a comment made, and I don't remember who it was. I do want to let everyone know that this task force was not an Eastport centric effort, not at all. Bill Reichart, who now is president of the Eastport Civic Association, is an excellent mediator. And Anna, I'm going to read your article, but he was, as a managing partner for a law firm in DC, he was very good at drawing out comments and participation from all members, whether they were extroverts or introverts. And we selected him, the committee selected him. It wasn't an appointment by the mayor, whatever. So this was a very grassroots selection, and it was based on his skills. It had nothing to do with the fact that he was from Eastport. And we had representatives from every single ward in the city, and then a representative. I was the representative of community associations in the county. And we had great participation from parole civic associations, the civic associations down by the giant shopping center. So all of these areas are very important to Region 7. I just wanted to make sure that you didn't walk away thinking that was just an Eastport exercise. It very much was not.
Great. Well, Lily, thanks for taking the time to follow up on that discussion. And I couldn't agree more. It is a really important component of how this is all going to come together in the end for us in terms of our recommendations. So thanks again for sharing that with us. Is there any other items we want to cover under our old business category here? Okay, not seeing any. We're going to go ahead and close that out and move into our next section, which is group discussion on regional issues. And Patrick, you said you wanted to say a little bit before we get underway there.
Yeah, if I could just kind of introduce what I'm hoping that we're going to do. So the whole purpose of this meeting was the last two meetings, we presented a whole lot of information on the topics of transportation and economic development, schools and libraries and emergency services. And it was kind of as you said, Leo, a fire hose of information. And the volume of information didn't really allow for a whole lot of time for you all as a committee to be together and discuss ideas. There was a little more time for that in the last meeting, but probably still, I wanted to create this meeting to give you all space to discuss some of those issues, some of the issues within those topic areas. And so what we've done is we've pre-populated, Desiree and I have pre-populated a Jamboard. We used this tool previously with you all, with the issues that that we heard in some of your questions to the different agencies or in some of the agency presentations. And we've also pre-populated it, and I'll share this with you in just a minute. We've pre-populated it with some comments that we've gotten from public input from the first questionnaire that was sent out to the public, and also from the feedback map that that was on our hub site and also in the libraries. Got a lot of comments in both of those areas, or in both of those input opportunities. And so we've pre-populated these things on the Jamboard. Wanted to have you all look at these and review them, and then hear from you. Does this cover all of the things in these topic areas that need to be addressed in our region plan? What is missing on this list? What's not captured here that needs to be captured, and that we're going to need to make sure that we have some strategies for? So as with as mentioned in the article that Anna had shared with us, we really do want to make sure that we're hearing from everyone. So if you tend to be a little bit quiet, but you have thoughts, please speak up. I'm hoping that this will be a free-flowing dialogue. Unfortunately, we're not in person, so we're having to do this virtually, but unmute yourselves and just speak up, please. And note also that this is a first pass at this. What we're going to do is Desiree and I will take what comes out of this conversation, and we'll organize and compile these later as goals and policies and strategies that will just be a draft for your input later. And we'll also be discussing other topics to come, like natural resources and housing. Those are the next two topical meetings. So we'll kind of repeat this exercise with those as well. And we are working a lot behind the scenes to get some more information to you that will be shared at a later date, particularly with the housing. And when we get into land use discussions, we've got some background analysis going on, land use analysis, and looking at the capacity of our current zoning code and what development capacity exists that's unrealized there. And also we're going to share with you some a little bit more detailed demographic data and population projections later. So all of that is to come. We're still in the middle of this process, and we wanted to kind of put a bow on the last two topical meetings. So if I can go ahead and share my screen and get started with what I'm hoping to do today. Now, can you all see my I'm sorry, give me 1 second to kind of get my screen organized here. Can everybody see this this Jamboard here?
Yes.
And can read well enough? So I've got 4 screens here, and I wanted to kind of go through all of these and let you all
Patrick, those are two separate questions. I can see it. I can't read it that well, but.
Thank you. And thank you for speaking up. That's exactly what I wanted. So let me go through this a little bit and give you all some time to think about it, and then give us any additional items that need to be on here. So the first one,
Patrick, before you do, to the young lady that said she couldn't see it, if you can pinch it out, perhaps that would help you read a little better. I'm on my phone as well, and pinching it out, squeezing to the middle and splitting your fingers
I'm
out.
not on my phone, Tony. I'm on a laptop, and it doesn't pinch out.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay,
So-
sorry about that.
another option is if you look at the top of your screen or the side, depending on how you have your screen set up, you have view options. And if you click on view options, you have the opportunity to increase it to 150 or 200%, something of that nature that will help you. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. So I wanted to start with transportation rather than going sequentially, because I do think transportation is going to be probably the biggest topic of discussion. It perennially is anytime we have a meeting anywhere in the county. So I kind of try to budget about a half hour for this. And so again, we've compiled some of the comments that we've gotten, some of what we heard from the different agency presentations, and also I added in a few potential issues that are raised in the draft goals and policies of the Annapolis Comprehensive Plan, things that we need to be aware of and sort of coordinate with on the city side. So we've divided these into different modes, and there are also notes on jurisdictional coordination and sustainability as related to transportation. But just in a nutshell, under some of what we're hearing with regard to bicycle and pedestrian mode of transportation, a desire for safe walking and biking infrastructure, and making sure that we're connecting key destination points in the region and providing links to these beyond the region and to the network that's beyond just the Region 7. In the area of transit, we've gotten comments noting the need for improved service within the region, and then improved service beyond the region, particularly linking to employment areas like Fort Meade, District of Columbia, Baltimore, and so forth. There was a specific comment about commuter service needed on Forest Drive and to the Bay Ridge area, and then also linking Annapolis Transit, the Annapolis City bus system, to the Truman Park and Ride. There was also a comment about housing, making sure that we're providing housing near our transit stations and our transit lines. And we'll discuss this a little bit more when we have our housing discussion in July. Under just general traffic and roadways, reducing traffic congestion, that's probably the #1 comment that we hear. And then making sure that we're prioritizing areas for improvement of traffic congestion and roadways. Greater interconnectivity of the road network, and then several comments or in several places there were specific road priorities that were noted for capacity and safety investments, particularly along Maryland 450, which is West Street, Maryland 2, 665 and Forest Drive, and then also at the 665 I-97 junction. And there were also comments to make sure that we're addressing the constraints of the single road corridor in the Peninsula Policy Area, and that's Forest Drive, being that one way in, one way out for the peninsula. Comments on the need for interjurisdictional coordination, stronger coordination with the city and transportation planning, and also in wayfinding, signage, and such. And then finally, several comments that kind of come under the container of sustainability, making sure that we're managing growth and development in order to mitigate the impact on traffic, thinking about transportation infrastructure and making sure that it's resilient to the effects of climate change, thinking about making sure that we're prepared for infrastructure, for new technologies like electric vehicles and automated vehicles. And then finally, just promoting telework as an alternative to commuting. So that in a nutshell are some of the things that we've heard in the realm of transportation. So throwing it to you all, does this cover it? What is missing? What other comments, nuance do we need to be thinking about as we go through this region plan?
Hey, Patrick, it says there's something about traffic safety or traffic calming. I don't necessarily see that there, you know, in terms of speed bumps and things like that. That might, I know that's a concern for my neighbors in our part of Region 7, just making sure that speeding through residential areas isn't become an issue as people start to use it more as commuter routes. I know that's kind of unique, but I just wanted to put that out there if others thought that would be good as well.
So traffic calming for residential areas, okay?
I'm not sure if I see issue of crosswalks. You know, we have a lot of crosswalks that are not properly marked and so on, and I don't see that anywhere.
So making sure, so yeah, marking safety issues, probably under the pedestrian umbrella.
Yeah, be under pedestrian, yeah.
So I'd like to, if I may, I don't know if we're supposed to be like hand raising digitally or by physically, but with regard to the traffic calming in residential areas, a lot of, so I'm retired federal highway. So a lot of times what we find or found was that a lot of people assume traffic speed bumps were the best thing in the world for them. And as soon as they got them, they wanted them removed because people can't sleep. So is there a way to indicate that this would be promote traffic calming? I don't desirable type. I mean, I'm struggling with a word, but I think it's important that because a lot of folks have no idea, you know, landscaping vehicles, boat trailers, especially in you know, the neck and so on, will keep people awake because people are always moving. So I'd like to have some kind of cautionary term there so that, you know,
we're not just talking about speed. Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you there, Linda. In fact, our homeowners association met with somebody from the county and talked about alternatives to just speed bumps for that reason specifically. So I think traffic calming was the phrase used to discuss like a variety. And Patrick or Desiree, feel free to speak up. You might know about this more than any of us do.
Traffic calming is the technical term and it's acceptable term. All I'm saying is that I think it would be, yes, alternatives, but I guess the reason I'm saying is my concern is that people just make assumptions that a certain type of calming, speed calming or traffic calming in their community, it's not one size fits all. So I think it's important to say that what's appropriate or might work in that particular community. Because if it's going from like a commercial area into a residential area, speed bumps in the commercial area may very well be great, you know, leading into that residential area. But then when you get in the residential area, it might change a bit. So I'm struggling with, I've been retired 5 years. My brain is a little, you know, out of the technology, but I just want to have some kind of caution there.
So maybe as appropriate to the location.
Yeah. At least get somebody to think about what it is because it's not a one size fits all.
And that's a good comment for everything that we do, because there are a lot of tools in the planning toolbox to be applied. And again, there's no one size fits all for any aspect of what we're going to be doing with this region planning work.
You know, another thing that I know several of us talked about was the need for sidewalks in areas, especially where there are none or there are partial sidewalks and people are walking and there's a lot of traffic.
So
and I'm not sure that it fits into any of these.
And I agree, sidewalks are very important, especially in a lot of areas, but I'm a little curious as to how does the responsibility for maintaining that sidewalk then transition to the residents whose home it is now in front of? Because isn't there a county requirement that those sidewalks be cleared after so much snow and that type of thing? So
Mhm.
are we we're improving safety, but are we unintentionally creating a hazard, or not a hazard, but a burden for someone?
That is a point, and I think, yes, it is a requirement that you clear the sidewalk within X number of hours after a snowstorm. I have sidewalks on 3 sides of my house,
Patrick,
so
this is
that's
Tony.
fine.
I guess
Could I
my
jump in for a
comment
second?
about that is it's a lot
Yeah.
more important to keep people safe. If they have to walk in the street after a storm, that's a lot more dangerous than putting that burden on somebody to shovel their sidewalk. But
Mhm.
that's just,
Patrick, can you hear me?
We can, Tony, go ahead.
Okay, depending on where you live and the circumstances, and if you're primary, secondary, or third in the category for the public safety to get to you. I'm saying that because I live in a cul-de-sac. It is in the city of Annapolis, but if it could apply also in the county elsewhere, sometimes they can't get to you. And so when they do get to you, the work you've done on your sidewalks, they cover over to have somewhere to put the snow. So we need to understand that all circumstances, like you said earlier, one size does not fit all. So we have to play it by ear how that works. And it's, that comes down to the person who's doing the work and end user and how it's going to be handled. But that one size doesn't fit all. So just comment, my experience of living where I live now since 1994, we've had off and on service. And if the snowstorm's very bad, they're not going to get to us right away. When they do, whatever work we've done, sometimes they have to cover over. So just the circumstances sometimes that are not explained in the written text.
Mhm. Thank you.
So I just want to point out, we had this, I don't know if you guys can see me editing these notes too, but this post-it here, expand
Mhm.
safe walking, biking facilities, including shared use paths, sidewalks. I just added sidewalks, separated bikeways, and even bridges where appropriate. Do we think that captures sort of this point, or do we need to edit that in any way?
Quite honestly, I don't think you can capture every point. I just needed to say that. So I think what you're talking, how things being planned, is still very good. But I don't think you can capture every point.
Okay. I didn't, I guess it was Priscilla, you made the original comment, right? Do you think that's?
yeah, I'm fine with that. I think that's
Okay.
fine.
Mm-hmm. I do too.
I think, Patrick, in terms of feedback, the sort of theme across all of these sticky notes is regionalism, right? I don't think you specifically call that out, but the regionalism piece and the interconnectivity is so important here. And it looks like that's accurately represented. The one piece I would add under transit on the middle blue square, ensure housing opportunities near accessible to transit. Another issue that we haven't sort of dived into, it's a national issue around affordable housing. So we say ensure housing opportunities. Should that say, mixed use or affordable, something along those lines? Or am I going outside the bounds of transportation there?
A little bit. Let's go ahead and add it in here, and we are going to get into that in our July meeting.
Okay.
Heavy into housing and thinking about affordability. So I think this will come up again then, for sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that.
Patrick, I just wanted to add a comment here. I'm going through the background materials, and the Plan 2040 goals and policies pertaining to transportation in Region 7 is kind of a list of things that I think we're tasked with as the SAC group. And it says, one of the things that we're supposed to do here is, this is like from the last sentence in the lead-in, says, the SAC's eventual task will be to help develop region-specific recommendations to make these goals and policies a reality. So what I'm seeing here, and maybe it's a little early, but these are kind of broader statements
Mhm.
about what we need to do, like to make our transportation system better. And these could apply anywhere with the exception of the specific commentary about the feeder down into Bay Ridge, Forest Drive, which we know is really kind of a big part of what, we're going to have to provide some more specific recommendations on, and Willie spoke to that a little bit. But I'm just wondering, like, should we be drilling down a little more specifically to what's happening that, that is specific to us? Like there's a few in here, like the multimodality center at the shopping center, at Pearl, at the mall, that's a pretty big thing. That would be great. And access to the parking ride, so I can get a bus to New York or, DC or whatever. But I'm wondering, should we be looking at it in a little more granular form? And then also, I'm also thinking, like, one of the problems, that's one. And then two is, one of the problems I struggle with is people continue to say they want to try and drive development to areas that can support it. And some people make the case that Anne Arundel County, specifically Region 7, might be saturated. I don't tend to agree with it, but the real failure, I think, is our public transportation isn't clear to people. The schedules are unknown and they're unreliable. And if we're trying to drive people, particularly in our community, to take advantage of public transportation, it would be nice if it was really clear, like, where can I get a bus and where is it going to take me? Like, if I go to a city, I can find maps that show me all that stuff. And I'm just not sure that's real clear to people who live in Region 7. So let's talk about the first one first, like, and I'll let you and Desiree talk to that. Am I misinterpreting where we ought to be right now?
Not at all. I think I think in the region plan is where we would get to some of that specificity. And even one of the things that Brian Ulrich had said in his presentation was that he was hoping that we would drill down and get some prioritization of some of their transportation recommendations, get some sense of prioritization from this group.
Go ahead, Lil.
I had the same thought that Leo had. These are all, I think we are. I love that you pointed out, Kristen, the regionalism, because I think that's really important, especially for folks out in the Annapolis Neck Peninsula. We basically drive into the city within half a mile, and we are kind of beholden to city services and city planning, even though we're county residents. So we really see things regionally, and we're just hoping that both governments start looking at what's going on out here more regionally. And also to Leo's point about granular recommendations, because these are all great. I've seen these recommendations since, small area plans 2009. And so I really hope we can get into some specifics and put them into the processes that are working in the county and the city, capital planning and impact fees for different developments, because when the infrastructure needs occur, it's kind of death by 1,000 cuts for us out here. There's smaller developments, and so each developer, I think, makes a fair case that they shouldn't be burdened with improving the county or city infrastructure around them. However, it needs to be done. So these impact fees, I hope we can take a closer look at them and how they're administered, and see if there's any way we can change that process so that the governments have a bigger pot of money to spend on public infrastructure to support the developments. The one area, and I don't know, I missed, and I do apologize, just the timing was horrible in these meetings, was in the traffic area. A big concern that came out of the Forest Drive was evacuation and emergency routes, and the fact that Google and Waze send people off into these very small neighborhoods as relief routes, even though they aren't safe. They may not have sidewalks. So commuters are just getting funneled into these smaller neighborhoods. And can the county or the city get involved with Waze or Google and make some changes to instruct? Because we basically have because of technology, we kind of lost the ability to control traffic during emergency shutdowns because everybody flips on Waze and takes off. And I don't know how we can deal with that, but that's a very real problem out here with the one route in and out. And I don't know where we would put that.
Yeah. So Lily, I hear what you're saying, but I just want to go back to the point, like, so Patrick, I think what I'm hearing you say is there'll be an opportunity to drill down with more specific recommendations for, like, let's talk about public transportation and bus routes. Like maybe we can look at where we want to have, where we think areas are underserved or you know, not served at all from that standpoint. Will that be part of our recommendation process?
Yeah, I think so. And if there are thoughts on that we can start that conversation today if people have specific thoughts on any of those more specific items.
Yeah, I can't say that. I mean, I'm just going to speak first because I'm already talking, but I can't say that I have those yet. But I think the discussion leads me to, you know, doing a little deeper dive on,
I'm sorry.
on things like public transportation, because I think, you know, the challenge is we're trying to alleviate congestion and overloading the roadways, and we're trying to drive people to public transportation, but there's nothing to drive them to right now. It's so minimal that it doesn't, you know, if I tell you to ride the bus, you'd say, sure, tell me where to get it and when I can expect it. And I don't think that's clear to us, specifically in the city and the county and that interface right now. So I'd like to spend a little time looking at that myself, and maybe we can revisit that at a subsequent meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, Leah, I couldn't agree with you more there. I would love to have a larger conversation about, you know, improving public transportation, but I've been an Anne Arundel County resident for 5 years, and I can't even begin to comment on what our existing infrastructure is. So that might be something that we might want to table this conversation, and maybe Patrick, I don't know if the county could bring in somebody from staff to review it with us, or that might be the issue itself, is that there isn't existing infrastructure but yeah, I agree with Leo. I think that's an important subject that we should be discussing.
Yeah, let's I think that's a good idea. And so we can do this one of a couple of ways, or maybe there's another idea. We could revisit this in a subsequent meeting, or should this be a kind of a subcommittee kind of effort where if there are a few people who want to really dig into this issue in more detail and start to think about prioritization and very specific transportation recommendations, we can have that subcommittee work offline and bring some recommendations to the group later. Would that be what are y'all's thoughts on that?
So are you suggesting a subcommittee to talk about transportation as a whole, or a subcommittee to talk specifically about public transit options?
Either. I was throwing out it was really the model that I was throwing out. You know, do we want
Gotcha.
a full SAC meeting or a subcommittee meeting, and if so, what focus?
I would join that.
I'm sorry, who said that?
I would join that. That's Lily saying. I would
Yeah.
join a small group that takes a deep dive into that, because I think that's just critical to what we're trying to do here.
And
So-
I would like to say the same thing, Lily. Thank you. I would very much enjoy, because I'm thinking of all the, you know, my past experiences and also the things and how they can be applied to what we're talking about right now. And you know, I want to get my own little list of you know, stickies going, and before I forget them, because sometimes you know, things come to your mind, and if you don't have a place to like park them, they get lost as you move on. But I would be more than happy to participate in a subgroup.
Yeah, Linda, that sounds great. Patrick, what I'm going to recommend is that we do break this down into a subcommittee and let that smaller group kind of dive into and I'm going to say the focus for that group from my standpoint would be public transportation opportunities in Region 7 and the interface with the city and the larger kind of regional connections we're looking for. So maybe a small group could go ahead and dive into that and come back to the larger group with a brief presentation and discussion at that point. Does that sound appropriate to everyone on the committee?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. I think that transportation is a big issue for everybody on this committee. So I just want to point that out. If a subgroup can come up with an initial recommendation and we can all provide input, that's great. But I think each one of us is representing an area that has its own unique transportation issues.
Yeah, Priscilla, don't misconstrue what I'm saying. I'm just speaking to public transit, just because it's a lot to understand as a group.
I understand that. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm just saying a small group would dive into that and provide information as a background to the group for the broader discussion, rather than everyone having to do that research themselves.
I guess what I'm saying is, I don't disagree with that. It's just that I know, I think I'm the only one in the Heritage Harbor area. There are a lot of people down here, and I don't think anybody's thinking about like our particular area. I'm not really willing to be on that committee, but I want people to consider all of the different stakeholder groups.
Sure. Well, I think your point's well taken. And again, what I'm proposing that the subcommittee do is just kind of dive deeper into the public transportation opportunities in Region 7, maybe map it out a little bit so we understand it. And then, I think you're right. That ought to be a really good connection point for us that makes it easy. So let's talk about that as a group. And then before we make a recommendation as a committee, we'll come back and have a discussion that's broader about that topic.
I think Leo brings up a good point. I know that he talked about there not being a lot of access to understanding the routes and everything like that. But if we were able, Patrick, I don't know if you have access to this, but send out a map of all the routes that the buses are taking. That would be a great visual for everyone on this committee, and then it would allow us to provide more comment on. Secondarily, as far as transportation in general goes, when we look at the budget for, I know that it hasn't really been passed yet, but what is the kind of scope here? Are we going to be completely designing new roads, or is this more or less patching roads we have and adding extra lanes, because that kind of drastically affects the kind of recommendations we would be making, I think.
I would suggest starting with some of the background information that was sent out. There's been a lot of transportation planning in the area of all of these modes through Move and Arundel, which is the countywide transportation plan, the priority letter that we shared previously. There's a lot of work going, and the bike ped plan that it's in process now. It's being updated at this point. So I think that is a starting point, and then helping maybe prioritize some of the recommendations that come out of that, and just making sure that there aren't any additional recommendations that need to be considered. Okay. But there's a lot of work already done. So why don't we pull some of that stuff together again for everyone. Who would like to work on this? I've got Linda and Lily as interested in this as a subcommittee. Is anybody else here interested? Anna?
Yeah, I can. I would love to sit on that subcommittee. I'm personally really interested in learning more about the existing infrastructure.
Okay. And we have several folks who aren't here today, so we can put this out to everybody. But we'll let me start with that. Start pulling some of this together. Get a staff person from Office of Transportation to see if they can maybe meet with us, and we'll figure out time and where, and figure out how this goes from there. Does that sound like a plan?
It sounds great to me, Patrick. I'm interested in that group as well, and would love to serve as a member on the subcommittee. However, acting as a chair, I'm not sure that's appropriate. I don't want to, push myself too far into one group. So you maybe we'll talk a little more about that. But if that seems appropriate, I'd probably join that group as well.
Okay. I mean, I really don't see our small group as I see, to what Priscilla was saying, I see us coming up with a format for consolidating recommendations and current facts about transportation, then bringing it to the larger group for discussion and decision making. I didn't envision this group actually making final decisions and then just getting a supporting vote. So I saw it more as kind of doing the homework and getting the draft information together for the group.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay.
Patrick, I think you probably want to move on, but just one last thought. I don't see anything here related to micro mobility.
Okay.
What I mean by that are scooters,
Mhm.
whatever brand, electric bikes, scooters. We know they're coming to the town center. So how does that fit into the our overall transportation plan?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, I think the city of Annapolis just rolled out a big e-scooter, e-bike program, but you're right. I'm not sure if there's any plans for expansion or how it plays into the larger infrastructure.
Yeah, all one needs to do is go to their Facebook feed and they can read all about the city's scooter program.
Well, I have 3 daughters that live in New York City and they swear by e-bikes. So we definitely have to get that going.
And figure out how we're going to coordinate on our side of the line with what's going on in the city. Transportation, as much as any other topic that we'll be discussing, is definitely a regional thing and not in isolation. So that coordination will be key. So great comment. Thank you.
Patrick, this is Tony again. Just in the transportation piece, in everything we're talking about, will there be a period after we start that we'll come back and revisit what we've planned to see if there's any tweaks that needs to be done?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got several meetings scheduled toward later. I think it's later. I don't have the schedule up in front of me. I think it's later this year where
Okay.
we will actually review draft goals, policies, and specific strategies.
Right.
And you'll tweak those, and then there will be a draft phase before it goes out to the public. You'll look at the whole plan, and so that there will be several points in this process. This is just a starting point.
Okay, thanks very much.
Would we get help with mapping any kind of results that we're finding? Presentation materials for our research?
Yeah, we can help you. I may need to talk to you about what it is that you're thinking of with
I
that.
just feel like some of the information that we'll put together visually, it will be really important to be able to show it
Yep.
on mapping and.
Gotcha. Yes.
And I just wanted to bring up too, some of the things we're talking about are actually available on, in terms of the data, are available on the hub site. We have like bus routes and that mapped on our existing conditions map. So if you go to the hub site, there's some data there already that we can use as a starting place, at least, for just identifying, where these routes are and what, what's missing. So let's remember to use that too.
And that website is aacounty.org/region7.
I'll put it in the chat.
So why don't we move on quickly to some of the other topics? There may not be as much discussion with some of these others as it relates to land use. So let's see that we've captured what we need to. I was going to move next to the area of economic development.
Well, hey, Patrick, can I just interrupt for 1 second and follow up
Sure.
on what Desiree said? If you go to the hub site, you can find the overall, the map that shows Region 7, and you can turn on transportation bus routes and they come up in different colors. And that's a real quick synopsis of where they go. But again, I know we all want to drill down a little bit, but it's a starting point, just like Desiree said, and it's pretty, the graphic's real good. So Lily, you can see that, and that, that'll be a starting point for what we come up with.
Thanks. So in the area of economic development, these have been organized under amenities, redevelopment, coordination, and housing. Again, comments that we've received, things that we heard in the agency presentation, even some comments or draft language from the Annapolis Comprehensive Plan. So a lot of comments that we've received from people favoring the shopping, dining, service opportunities in the area, and the idea that we need to really maintain these opportunities within the region. Also comments on making sure that we have commercial and service hubs serving our local neighborhoods, and making sure that they're appropriate in scale and character to adjacent local neighborhoods. A lot of comments encouraging redevelopment over what's called greenfield development. So in other words, making sure that we're focusing our development efforts on redeveloping underutilized built properties, and doing that over knocking down forests and undeveloped land and developing that. So prioritizing redevelopment opportunities, particularly where properties are vacant. And some specific areas that were mentioned were the Bay Ridge commercial area, the Ridgely Avenue area, which we talked about in our driving tour, both of those areas. Several comments promoting the idea of a mix of uses in areas, particularly in the Parole Town Center. I would ask also, and you all should be thinking about, are there other areas within Region 7 that we want to think about as appropriate for a mix of use? We'll discuss this a little bit more when we get into our land use conversations, so be thinking about that. And another comment on housing and making sure that we've got housing that is affordable to our workers. Again, our housing conversation will dig into that a lot more deeply in July, but these things all sort of interconnect. So they come up in many places. Amenities, people appreciate their amenities, recreation areas, farmers markets, green spaces, and there are many others that were mentioned. Coordination with the city, again, and specifically in the area of tourism development. And I will say in the area of economic development, Plan 2040 really notes, it has a lot of strategies that are really supportive of the work that the Economic Development Corporation does to promote business growth and development. And so I think our region plan would similarly have strategies that support a lot of the work that is ongoing. But that's in a nutshell what we've kind of gathered so far from these various sources in the area of economic development. Is there anything that comes to mind that is missing or that we need to make sure that we're thinking of?
You specifically mentioned the Parole Town Center. I think we also spent a lot of time discussing the Westfield Mall. And I know that that's privately owned, but I have no idea how it's zoned. Is it zoned for mixed use or is it just zoned for commercial?
No, it's zoned for mixed use.
So they could, in fact, now whoever buys it could in fact turn it into
They could
a
put
combination
residential.
of, okay.
Mhm. Yeah, and technically it's not, the zoning is not mixed use, just for the record, I need to be very clear. The zoning is town center zoning, but that does allow residential uses as well, high density residential.
Okay.
And something I brought up earlier, like when we first got started, is someone came to me from outside about mixed use for not public housing, I'm sorry, affordable housing, like for police, fire, nurses, and teachers. If that was a possibility, I think, because I think people talked about the Glen Burnie town, Marley Station, and more of these places are being deserted because of the economy or changes. Well, are they going to be considered, or is the conversation still being considered about that being affordable housing for folks?
I think it's a good point, Tony, and it's part of, I think, that mixed use conversation. Our traditional, we will get into this a lot more when we get into our land use conversation, but our traditional zoning categories, many of the commercial categories don't allow for residential uses. So that's why when I ask about, are there areas where we need to be thinking about mixed uses? The Parole Town Center already has that in place. Are there other places? I think that in the virtual driving tour, Jonathan had mentioned that commercial area down in Bay Ridge as a potential for exactly what you were saying, Tony. Is there a way to bring in some affordable housing and bring that into that mix of commercial area there.
Mhm.
Some of those properties are ripe for redevelopment, but there's also that city line that jogs through there as well. So again, that interjurisdictional coordination is key
Yeah.
in that area as well.
Okay, thanks.
Whatever happened with the accessible or what do they call it? You know, adding the dwellings to the residential properties. There was a bill that Lisa Rodvian proposed, and I don't know whether that passed or not. Accessible dwelling units.
Accessory dwelling.
unit.
Accessory, I'm sorry, accessory. Did that pass?
I'm ashamed to say I don't, off the top of my head, I'm not sure where that stands
know
right now.
either.
So I will need to find that out. And it's on our list to discuss in the July meeting. So hence I didn't take the opportunity to look that up before this meeting.
Okay, because it did
Good.
pass in the city.
Mhm. Right.
And it seems like maybe that's something that should be here,
Mhm.
because I think that really helps economic development.
I think you're speaking to, well, don't let me put words in your mouth, but I think that this also speaks to workforce housing. We're thinking about these young, say, teachers and firefighters and such that are just starting out, making sure that we have housing for them. And that's one type of housing opportunity that could be a little bit more affordable to those types of folks.
Actually, I was thinking about the opposite end of the spectrum. One of the things that AARP is really pushing is accessory dwelling units for seniors, because a lot of people are on fixed incomes and can no longer afford the property taxes on their properties. So if they can turn part of their property into an accessory dwelling unit, then they can rent it out to that firefighter or the teacher, and now they can afford to continue to live in their property. So it fits both ends of the spectrum as well as the middle.
Great point. And we'll bring all of this back up in July for sure, but I love that. Thank you so much.
Patrick, I don't know how much information we can get because they are privately managed, but I've had a lot of comments come to me asking for information on for Pearl Town Center, just what is the vacancy rate at their in their condos, and what's the vacancy rate and turnover rate for the restaurants? And there's I mean, it seems like it's revitalizing, and I don't know what the criteria are for performance measures there, but there's just been comments about a lot of restaurants being vacant, and that the vacancy rate at the condos is higher than one would expect. I don't even know where to get that kind of information and to start that discussion, because again, there's a concern to continue to do mixed use, which sounds great, but if our kind of crown jewel of mixed use is having vacancy issues, is it wise to zone for to create similar problems somewhere else?
Lily, it's interesting. I've heard comments from a lot of people who can't afford to live there because their rents are so terribly, terribly high. So, that's that if they have a vacancy rate, they've created their own problem.
And that might be the case. There's other situations that have occurred in the city where a development was supposed to have moderate, low income rental rates, and then they were taken away. And so if you promote something like that, how do you ensure that there will be affordable rental rates when the mixed use development is finished?
So
Desiree, capture that one. That's really important.
Yeah, so I was thinking along the same lines a couple of meetings ago. If you all remember the apartment building that was built at the corner of, I think it was West Street and Chinkopin. And it was supposed to be targeting like teachers and public service personnel and so on with lower lower rates. And I remember that there was such a huge vacancy rate there in the beginning, and they couldn't fill it. And so I was wondering just a couple of meetings ago if we could, and I realize it's a city, but it gives you some kind of a baseline. What are the rents on them now and what is the vacancy rate? And I would certainly think we should be able to retrieve that type of information somehow.
That's 1901 West Street.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, let me see what we can get on that for our discussion when we get into housing and this affordability question, and what it is that, what are some of the strategies that we need to be looking at to get housing that is affordable for different income levels. And we'll hear from some different folks who work in that space for the county. So I'll make a note here and see what we can get for that.
Patrick, I just wanted to respond to Lily's comment too about, Pearl Town Center and the vacancy rate there. Clearly those are more at the upper end of the spectrum in terms of, the cost per unit and, the market they're trying to serve. And so I just would caution that we not throw out the mixed use model, because the goal for most of those types of projects, particularly in an urban environment, is to provide housing that is at a lower cost. And, the town center is a pretty upscale development, I would argue. And so, I think that's a little bit, I don't know that serves the need that we have, to be honest with you. I mean, I know there's a need for people to live in, upscale places, but, that model is really good at addressing moderate to lower income families. And so that it just so happens that Pearl is not that, but most of them can be. So.
Well, and I was also thinking of the buildings behind, like towards Festival. There's a whole nother section of apartments and condos beyond the higher scale. I think the point is just, can we get some information on projects that are already have been built and that the county continues to support? I mean, the county CIP projects still are being programmed to fix the transportation around the town center. So when one of those developments goes in, I think it would be prudent to recognize that there's a long-term commitment from county to continue to improve infrastructure around that. So it'd be good to have a better idea of their success rates.
Sure. Yeah, good point.
For me personally, I look forward to the housing conversation. I used to live in the town center, so I can speak to it anecdotally and from my experience. But I will point out that Baltimore County just held an affordable housing work group, and there is a 50 or 60 page report that's coming out around housing. So that will be interesting to, as soon as it's available, I'll send it out to the group so that you all can read it. But we pulled in industry experts across the nation. Actually, we know this is a nationwide issue. And we also pulled in Dr. Tiffany Emanuel, who's an expert in this space. So great conversation, and sure, more to come on this. The one thing I will add here, under redevelopment efforts, I don't know, and I'm very unfamiliar with the county and with the Economic Development Corporation's offerings, but is there a grant opportunity for existing businesses as it relates to redeveloping spaces? So in other surrounding jurisdictions, for instance, if a property was devastated by fire, say, there's a grant opportunity to help those individuals rebuild. I don't know if that's an opportunity here in the county, or if that's a program we should consider looking at, some sort of grant redevelopment opportunity.
I don't know about that specific scenario. If there are grant opportunities specific to that, I would have to go back and look at that. I know that there is a commercial revitalization program that I think was not discussed in the presentation for this group, because we don't have any designated commercial revitalization areas in Region 7. These are primarily in Glen Burnie, Pasadena, and I think somewhat in the Laurel, Maryland City area. But there is that program that promotes flexibility in terms of uses and some grant funding for redevelopment in those areas.
I was just thinking about the recent fire and whether or not there'd be opportunities there for the county, well, it'd be the city in that case, to help with the redevelopment efforts. And I just wasn't sure if that was an opportunity that in Region 7. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll see what I can find on that. Okay. If we're ready to move on, I think these last two may go somewhat quickly. We'll see. Regarding schools and libraries, some of the information that we compiled, making sure that we're addressing school capacity efficiently. In the presentation that was given, there was a lot of conversation about overcrowding and such, and particularly Annapolis High School, and ways to address that. There's always adding to or building new schools or adding to existing schools, but he also mentioned other opportunities such as program location and school redistricting to help absorb some of the, or reallocate, I guess, some of the existing open seats that are in schools throughout the county. So is that a strategy that we would want to consider putting into this region plan, considering the location of various school programs and school redistricting in order to address, as strategies to address school capacity issues. And then also thinking about the impact of school capacity on the region's housing needs, and that being that when a school is over a certain level of capacity, I think it's 95% for elementary or middle schools, and then 100% for high schools. When they're at a capacity that's over that, that means that less housing can be built, and so therefore there's an impact of school capacity on making sure that we're able to meet the region's housing needs. And there have been a lot of comments and feedback that we've gotten generally about just perceptions of school quality among the public schools in this region. Did not see a whole lot of comments specific to our libraries in this region. I feel like our libraries are probably doing a really strong job. What's missing in any of this area?
Patrick, where would libraries fall? Adequate public facilities? I was thinking that was the, I'm sorry, I was thinking that was the adequate public facilities regulation, and I didn't.
No.
That, so libraries, I mean.
They're kind of not represented by any sticky notes on
Hillsmere is a very important hub for public meetings in the lower Annapolis Neck area, and it needs space. It doesn't have, I mean, it just needs a huge upgrade. And I think looking at what the foundation was able to do for the West Street Library, that's definitely 10 times the size needed out in Annapolis Neck. But the library out in Annapolis Neck, and Linda can tell you, it needs to be refreshed.
And based on the comments that we've gotten at all of the libraries on our feedback map, you're exactly right. That library is used a lot in person. So I think some supportive statements just regarding,
I mean, whenever
libraries.
We have public meetings, it's packed, and we have parking issues, and we don't have enough seating for people, and it has a very important need in our community. And there's been a lot of talk, just for the group to know, about maybe there is land there. Maybe that would be a good place to add a transportation hub, because it's right there, and it has it's close to the Quiet Waters and the library, and it's right off Bay Ridge. So making a
There's
small
no-
pitch for that.
There's no public transportation down that way at all. So I mean, that's a great
Mhm.
tie-in.
Yeah, there's a little tiny bit. There's a very thin brown line that comes through.
Oh, I didn't see it on my map, but perhaps I missed it.
Hey, Patrick, one issue that I've noticed, and I'm not sure if this is the right group to address it, is lack of preschool, universal public pre-K
Okay.
in
Mhm.
Anne Arundel County. It is offered, but it's not universal. For instance, if I wanted to enroll my son in pre-K, I'd have to be on a waiting list because I think it's income and needs based first. And then if he was to get on the pre-K program, the school he would go to would be in Edgewater, because it's not available at the school he's zoned for.
Uh-huh.
So, and that's something I know a lot of counties across Maryland and across the country are working on right now. So I just wanted to flag that. I know
Thank you.
that some of these issues are larger than what this group is for, but I wanted to add that if possible.
Okay. So lack of universal or addressing a lack of universal and accessible pre-K in the county. Does that sound good?
Yeah, and I like how Desiree put that under childcare, affordable childcare too. But that's again, that might be a different work group.
Thank you.
So back to libraries, Bush Library is absolutely fabulous. But again, tying it in with transportation, there's no public transportation from many communities there. I don't know if there's any transportation that goes there. But, you have these beautiful libraries, and how do you get there?
The city has a bus path that goes on West Street, but I'm not sure how it interfaces with the county. So that's
I'm
kind of stuff we'll dive into.
It doesn't come into my community. There's no public transportation in my area.
Yeah.
Are there any bus mobiles at library, portable mobile libraries around here?
I don't know the answer to that. He didn't bring that up in his presentation.
No, he didn't. And I haven't seen any or heard of any. And I would think that that might be something that we could think about or propose to them, or at least have them consider, because that would help to alleviate some of the transportation issues.
Okay.
Okay, this is Tony. That is public school and public library have the connection with. I've only seen it though in Boys and Girls Club areas and also public housing. So that's a conversation that just needs to be expanded.
In terms of opportunities with the libraries, I think what the library did in the mall, and how the county really embraced that, even though it was only supposed to be a temporary solution, I believe, when the Bush Library was closed for renovations. But seeing the success of that and turning that into a permanent fixture at the mall, I think is incredible. And I'd really love to see libraries in more accessible areas, whether, areas that are retail, zoned for retail, or easily accessible, through transit or by walking, I think is awesome.
Mhm.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I love the library in the mall. Such
It
a
is
great
nice.
model, such great programming. It's terrific.
So I work closely with some of the library foundation fundraising opportunities, and there is a master plan for renovating the existing libraries. And I think if you look back, the Eastport Library got a facelift. It didn't get an expansion, but got a facelift a couple of maybe a year or 2 years ago. And I believe the way to approach that, since they have a county line item as well as any money that the foundation can raise, when the master plan, I think the current master plan, I think is about to expire, and they're going to be doing a new one, or they just recently done a new one. And I think that if we're going to make any recommendations, it be done then, so that then the library director can then present his budget for the county review. So just saying, if we're going to do something, we probably need to sync up with when the next master plan is due. Otherwise, it'll be several years from now.
So Linda, that is exactly what our Forest Drive Task Force really tried to work hard on understanding. So the master planning cycle is so critical. As you said, you have to sink into all of these programming cycles, because if you miss them, your off years, and then
Right.
there's gonna be a whole new committee that shows up and starts this process all over again. So I hope we can understand for every recommendation we have, what is the overall process? It's getting acceptance of the master plan and getting into the CIP program, and then, making sure it gets on a line item in a budget, and just kind of understand what those processes are, because they're slightly different for every single category here.
Yeah, and that I believe that we shared that out in the background information ahead of the meeting where the libraries presented. So if you look back at that background information, there should be a link to that library facilities master plan as it stands now.
I know this doesn't relate directly to schools and libraries, but in California, they started putting a lot of little health clinics in malls. And if you can have health clinics and libraries in these strip malls, it's a fabulous use and much more easily accessible and readily accessible to people.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. The last, if we're ready to move on, I think this last one maybe will be quick. We'll see. Emergency services. We heard from fire, police, and the Office of Emergency Management, and some of the pieces that we gathered and sort of pre-populated here include just policies to support interjurisdictional coordination and staffing, having an evacuation plan for the peninsula area. Lily, you touched on that. Does that capture what you were talking about? You made a point earlier today.
I think that's a good placeholder, and we can go further from there, but that's pretty much what we
A
want.
start.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything, again, I think our region plan will, as Plan 2040 does, we'll probably have some supportive strategies for some of the work that they're doing currently, but are there any issues that we need to very specifically bring up in this area or make sure that we address in the region plan?
So I think well, we can do all the planning in the world, and we can even talk to how we can change Waze and Google if that's at all possible. But I think one of the things that we learned.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I was trying to remember specifically what Lily had said, and that was it. Thank you for that.
And so one thing that we learned after Katrina was in back then we didn't have Waze and we didn't have a lot of the real-time data information, but what we got from USDOT, what we got from OnStar, which was the preeminent, call taker for that type of evacuation, was that people didn't follow evacuation routes. It didn't matter how many evacuation signs or route signs were up. What they did is and we could see this in the after incident mapping where we saw where all the calls came from. People went the routes that they thought they knew. And if you're familiar with Forest Drive and if there's an evacuation, you're not going to get out Forest Drive. So you're going to go the route you know. So what are the opportunities for improving resident education and familiarization? I think regardless of how good the development plan is, if it can't be implemented because people don't use it and they don't know the risks of not using it, then I think it's doomed for failure.
You're absolutely right. That I would love to look at that. And there's also some slight physical modifications you can make to some of those streets and access points into neighborhoods that can be added if like you said, that's just where everybody's going to spill out. So there's a lot of different strategies, but I'm glad we're going to look at that.
Right, and contraflow is one of the biggest. We have 2 lanes in and 2 lanes out, and there's no reason why we can't have 3 lanes out, 1 lane in to allow for emergency vehicles. So those are the type of things that that have been learned over, you know, the last decade or so.
I'm wondering if there's any opportunity for a relief road that feeds into the peninsula area.
A what? I didn't hear you.
Relief road, a second path out.
I mean, that's been talked about for about 15 years and, but I think it would be great if we could find all that information and understand the decisions that were made that prevented that. Skipper's Lane, that's gonna come in behind Village of Provident Point, is probably the closest thing to a relief road. And we also fought pretty hard to have Bay Village Drive, a very small relief road down at the Forest Drive, Bay Ridge Shopping Center area
Yeah.
for a new development there. So there's almost micro. The only thing we can see at the moment is maybe just ask for micro relief roads as opposed to a major route out of. But I mean, it would be great if somebody could figure that out.
I mean, I remember when we had the telephone pole come down, I guess it was a year or two ago, and you know, Forest Drive was gridlocked for you know,
Hours.
part of a day. And you know, that's in our area. So maybe we could offer some recommendations about that. In you know, part of it was the inconvenience, but the other bigger part was emergency services couldn't get back to people in need. So we could look at that in a little more detail too.
Yeah, and Leo, that is still pretty fresh, even though it's about 3 years now, that's pretty fresh in people's minds out here. And there were a lot of safety concerns about kids not being able to be picked up, and people couldn't get to needed doctor's appointments because they were on the road, and just seniors concerned about being on the road for 3 or 4 hours and not planning to be away from their homes. So there were a lot of safety issues, and they keep being brought up when we have meetings.
Yeah, and I'll say too, Leo, there was also the parole mobility study that was done leading into the parole master plan update, which is in draft form now. There were some, again, minor relief roads or parallel roads that are recommended for further study in that as well. So some of those are a little bit further up the peninsula, but yeah, I don't know that we're going to get another corridor through the peninsula, but
I don't think so either. But these micro ones are, you know, maybe they can be improved to the point where, you know, well, it's just a topic for us to dig into a little further. I think this makes a lot of sense. And if you think about like Bestgate versus West Street, you know, that really is kind of a parallel path from one side of Region 7 to the other, which does provide relief, and it's a pretty good sized road. And so it's interesting. We do it pretty well east to west and north to south, and particularly in the peninsula, it's a little trickier.
That is all that I have, unless there are any other comments on any of this from folks.
Did we do the environment?
That's our next meeting.
Okay,
2
sorry.
weeks. And we'll be sending out some information on that shortly. If y'all are ready for this, I can give you, I've lost my agenda here. I can give you just an update of what, or a sense of what is coming next. Our next meeting in 2 weeks will be focused on natural resources. Desiree, do you want to talk briefly about what to expect there?
Sure. Yeah, so that meeting, I think we're hoping to have a little more time for sort of this discussion piece to be kind of the main part of that, whereas our prior meetings, you know, you were getting some pretty heavy, long presentations and then a short Q&A period. That meeting, we're hoping to have some brief 5-minute presentations, mainly focusing on water quality, land conservation, and sea level rise, being the kind of the 3 main topics, and then having a small group discussion as part of that meeting, kind of like having this conversation to get some of your ideas as we're, you know, have the stakeholder, have the presenters in the room. So yeah, that meeting will be much more of a kind of open discussion like this as what we're hoping.
And then our subsequent meeting in July, like I've mentioned a couple of times, will be focused on housing, and we'll be talking about housing affordability. We'll have some folks who work in that space who will talk to us and give us some information on some of the factors that go into building housing that is affordable for a range of different incomes and for people at different stages in life. So that will be the July focus. That's everything. I will kick it back over to you, Leo.
Great. Well, I want to thank everyone who stepped up and joined the conversation today. I know you heard a lot of familiar voices, but a few new ones too. And you know, it's exciting to hear everyone's different perspective on these things. And the hope is that in the end, we'll come together and provide a comprehensive list of recommendations that we're all real comfortable with. So thank you all for that. And Desiree and Patrick, thanks for the background information. And I know we'll talk again in another day or two about what to do to prep for our upcoming meetings. Also, thank you for those who stepped up to do a little homework for us on public transportation. And again, we're just going to do that group, whether I'm in it or not, is just going to do some research to bring back. There are some maps on the website that are pretty helpful, and I think you'll see it's pretty limited there. So I think those are good areas to target. So with that, I think I'm going to see if there's any comment from the group that anyone wants to make before we close out.
Leo, I have a quick question. I'm sorry, I had to leave the meeting for a few minutes to take a phone call. What's the approach for the subcommittee on transit? Yeah, so what we're going to do is, and I'll coordinate this with Patrick and Desiree, but there'll be a small working group, a subgroup that will do research for us in terms of what public transportation is available to us, and the condition of it and the reliability of it, and areas that are that perhaps are underserved, and just kind of come back to this group with kind of a little research that we're going to do. One thing that is available on the site is the map for the county, but how that interfaces with the city isn't really clear from the background info, or if it is, I missed it. So, but I'm encouraging that group to look at that stuff and come back with some stuff to discuss with the larger group, and then we can have a broader discussion about what we want to add to that. Does that make sense to everyone? I guess I'm so sorry. It's a busy day here, I guess. I get when can Patrick, can you just send us out some information about what the timelines and everything are going to be for that work group? That, I'm sorry, Leo, I wasn't very specific. I knew it was going to be organized. I just didn't know what the time frame was going to be and how it was going to be kicked off. So thanks. I'm sorry. I'm going back on mute because I have way too much noise going on. Sorry.
Yeah, so Patrick and Desiree and I'll talk about that and send out information to those who have volunteered, and we'll do something to the broader group to invite others who couldn't make it today. Does that sound right, Patrick and Desiree?
Yeah, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And then right before I close this out, I'm just going to encourage everyone to, Patrick and Desiree send us a really comprehensive package. I know it's a lot to read through before these meetings with the background materials, but, and I'm guilty of it too. I think we'll find a lot of the answers that we are looking for that come up during the discussion in there. So even if you can just click through it and see what's there, it'll really help us out as a group to move quickly.
I do try to highlight, these are the key things. If you can't read anything else, definitely look at this, but then to take a deeper dive, you can look at all of it. So I will try to highlight what I think is most important, which typically is, if nothing else, look at the background information from Plan 2040.
Yeah, really good stuff in there. And there's a lot of library info in there too about their plans, and I think it's 23 to 30 or so, but that's worth taking a peek at. So thanks again to everyone, and I'll look forward to seeing you at our next meeting. And with that, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn. Okay, we've got one second. There's a second. Great. Thanks everyone for everything that they're putting into this, and appreciate the effort, and look forward to seeing everyone in a couple of weeks.
Thank you. Right.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.